and then you will start to express it. So authentic thinking, kamikairu, is that kind of thinking in which you actually draws your cosmic intelligence that is alive within you into the world. And authentic, the term authentic, has the same roots as authority and also authorship.
Author, sure.
Yeah. Therefore, authentic thinking. You are the author of your thought, and you are the inner authority in the matter of thinking and also knowing and acting. And so this is a very spiritual concept, and thinking is a very spiritual activity. And when I began teaching, I realized that this aspect of spirituality was not paid attention to. Many people think spirituality is anti-thinking. They teach you no mind, no thinking. And when you study Zen, my background, they don't really say that. And when you're meditating, you have thought. And you think it is your thought. But if it is your thought, you can stop it. But usually, you cannot stop the thought that goes through your mind because it is not your thought. When you are thinking authentically, you can start and you can stop your thinking. So the thinking process has this two components: returning to the inner divinity, inner intelligence within you, this return, and then from there you again come back to this world. And so meditation, the initial process of returning to divinity is meditation, and from there to bring forth new ideas, this is a creation. So authentic thinking is a meditation creation evolutionary cycle.
Yes.
And that is very, very important for people to understand and to cultivate within themselves for their spiritual evolution.
Wow, that is a wonderful, juicy paragraph. It really is. And you hit upon a couple of points that I did want to bring up, and I'm glad you did. The idea of no mind, for instance, that has been popularized in Zen of all different kinds of Buddhism, in fact, which makes it all the more ironic that that's not what it means in the original Japanese, or probably the original Pali or Chinese for that matter. It has nothing to do with that. And there is a real trend in spirituality, as it's come at least to the West, that is anti-intellectual and, of course, anti-thinking. And it's been cut off. And so what you're saying here, Yasuhiko, you could say restores and rekindles the true energy, the true ki and chi of thinking, and re-ennobles it and re-extols it to the height that it really should occupy. After all great scientific breakthroughs, musical breakthroughs, artistic breakthroughs, business breakthroughs occur connected to thinking.
Yes.
Now, thinking, as we both know, also in traditional contexts like the Chinese, is something that actually occurs in the heart. And that's a whole other thing that I would like you to speak about.
Well, in Buddhism, we say those who cannot think cannot really feel, and vice versa. Thinking and feeling are together. And mind and heart are together. And when you are involved in truly creative thinking, all of your consciousness, including your heart and your feeling and your emotions, are involved. So you can't have a creative thought when you're not inspired. And when you're not inspired, when you cannot be inspired having really ecstatic feeling within yourself. So this intelligence that I'm talking about, that is alive within you, Tibetans call this, supraconscious cognitive intensity or ecstatic intensity. It is there within you.
Yes.
And it is actually the force that moves the universe. When I came to this country, and was developing a way of sharing spirituality with people, I had this question. In the last 200 or 300 years, we have seen a tremendous advance in science and technology. My wife purchased, iPad, and within few months, now they have a new iPad. And every day, young, brilliant scientists are making new discoveries. So science has developed tremendously since the time of Galileo, Kepler, and Newton.
Mm-hmm.
And look at religion or spirituality. It has stayed the same for the last 3,000 years. In my tradition, Buddhism and Zen Buddhism, Zen Master Dogen brought this Zen from China in 1226, when he was 26 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And they do the same thing today. Exact same. And they teach the exact same teaching. And in Tibetan Buddhism, any form of Buddhism you see, they basically live the culture that came from the past. When you go to Christianity, Muslim, the same. And I asked this question, why spirituality hasn't developed or evolved in the way science and technology has developed?
It's a very interesting question.
And when we talk about evolution of consciousness and spiritual evolution, we also need to talk about the evolution of teaching of spiritual evolution.
Yes.
And it has not evolved. So, I have always loved science and mathematics, and, I begin to compare. And there are a number of things I discovered. You can say I start to apply my own authentic thinking in this subject.
Yes.
And there are a number of things you can see. In science, when your theory and reality don't match, you take reality, not your theory. So you discard your theory, model, hypothesis, postulates, and you come up with something new. And
to match reality.
Yes, to match reality. Reality is the highest authority, not your theory. Second, in science, you start from the known and move into the unknown. Religion is opposite. You start from the unknown. I'm not denying there isn't God, there is God. But when you begin, you don't know. You really don't. So the God is unknown to most people. And you are asked to believe it. So you are asked to believe and accept the unknown. And then you try to explain the known. Totally opposite of science. And also, when your belief and the reality don't match, you actually deny reality and not the belief.
In exchange for faith.
Exactly. So, there are many other elements to this, but there's two things. Starting from the unknown,
actually.
Starting from the unknown to the known, as opposed to starting from the known to the unknown, and then taking your belief, a theory, model, over reality. And this attitude that pervade religion, not only Christianity and Judeo-Christian religions, but also Buddhism and other. So, in Buddhism, we don't have God, but you have Buddha. And you'll be lucky if you are evolved enough to be like Buddha. And Buddha would be disappointed if we haven't gone beyond him after 2,500 years. And if we haven't come up with something better than he came up with 2,500 years ago. So, in order to facilitate evolution of consciousness, spiritual awakening, and spiritual transformation, I began to develop a methodology which I think is more advanced At least technologically speaking.
You want to update
the
study of religion and spirituality.
Spiritual evolution using a higher technology than that exists before.
But let's take a look at
Yes.
something. I want to hear this, needless to say. However,
I'm a very humble person, by the way.
But of course.
Yes. Anyway.
Listen, our invitation by Jesus Christ and Buddha is go beyond me.
Absolutely.
And same with Gurdjieff, and same with Rudolf Steiner, and same with all of the great teachers that have come.
Yes.
They always want the student to surpass.
Yes.
And Zen as well.
Exactly.
So, we have that. We have a good footing.
Yes.
But I'd like to just return to this notion and hear what you have to say about it, Yasuhiko, which is this. Maybe one of the reasons that religion, as we think of it, and the study of spiritual discipline hasn't grown in the same ways as science and mathematics, etc., is because they feel that they've got a foothold in the eternal.
I know you were going to say that.
Oh, you were reading my mind.
Yeah.
And so therefore, what is changeable in the eternal? How can you re-express the ineffable? It's already inexpressible. So you will use the rest of cultural manifestations and evolution as an expression of your footing in the eternal. What would you say about that?
Now, you want to...
Does that all make sense to you?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
You want to define what eternal is. And let me just give you a kind of a visual model. So when we think of time, we have linear model or circular model, but you can just, for the sake of argument, just say linear model of time. It goes straight line. There's a vector to horizontal vector.
Right.
And then people think of now as, every moment of this. And
as sequential.
Sequentially now going through. And most people think that, this moment of now is eternal, and there's a truth to this, absolutely. But if you think of time in a two-dimensional way, and one dimension is that traditional horizontal time, and second is a vertical time that goes across, perpendicular to this horizontal time. When you have a experience of the now, that is actually that vertical moment of time. And eternal is a complementarity between the two. So timeless is not the opposite of time, but timeless is the integration of those two dimensions of time. Now,
Beautiful.
And horizontal time goes all the way, as you know. And vertical time can actually, this vector can actually increase in the magnitude. The vector has a direction and a magnitude. So depths of your understanding, the depths of your experience, and depths of experiencing this vertical time can change. And there is no limitation as to how far you can go in this vertical vector. When we begin to experience this horizontal and vertical vector on an ongoing basis, there's a possibility that the eternity increases, wholeness increases, and infinity increases. And those of us who studied mathematics, there is, something called set theory, in which we talk about transfinite realm, transfinite numbers. And they discovered there are infinite number of infinities. And there are different degrees to infinities. So infinity can actually increase in its degree of infinity. In the same way, we can actually increase in the degree to which you can experience this infinity, wholeness, and eternity. And for that reason, I can say that eternity evolves. infinity evolves and wholeness evolves. And if we do not evolve in this way, we are doing a disservice to the great contribution of Buddha and Christ and all those great masters who came before us.
Wow. Maybe that is the true symbology of the cross as well.
Beautifully said.
That is really, really interesting. I'm going to start up studying mathematics again. Truly. No, I see the other vector that you're drawing here, which is between the nature of consciousness and the notion of developing ourselves, evolving spiritually with our ability to experience the greater depth and magnitude of the vertical vector.
Exactly.
Yep.
And in another way of looking at this, and you have attended many of my lectures and stuff, so I engage people in the thought experiment. When you are conscious of something, and when you're conscious of something, your consciousness that is conscious of something is not conscious of itself. And meditation, and actually enlightenment experience, is when consciousness becomes conscious of itself without objectifying it. Once this happens, you begin to see you as a continuum. It's no longer you identify yourself with this objectified ego logical self, but as the self continuum in which large self is always present as an observer and also creator. And then you are actually watching your egological self, or small self, acting in the three-dimensional world with other people. So you begin to gain that dimension to this. And when you begin to live yourself not as a self or an ego, but as a self continuum, your experience of the moment of now, your experience of your vertical time begin to increase. And what evolves is the self continuum. And then the self, the larger self that is conscious of all those movements, also become conscious of something beyond it. And at the same time, this self that is the observer of the self continuum realizes that yourself and myself at this level
same self,
interpenetrating, interaccommodating, inter-being, inter-soul, inter-self, intersubjectivity, which is beyond the regular intersubjectivity that people most think of.
Yes.
You and I are one, at least not two. And that dimension of awareness also increases. So there's a tremendous possibility for evolution that we have, and we have not tapped into. That's why, in my program, I use different models and meditations and technologies to stimulate the evolution of consciousness from different directions, creating a synergy within each person's consciousness, so that something new will come into existence.
Well, we need a lot to come into existence that's new and novel, because by using just on the three-dimensional plane about 3 to 5% of our brain, look at the world that we've got. And inside this world is a huge volume of brilliance, of novelty. But there's also a huge interest in the egological. I love your use of that word. Egological, distinct from, by the way, I would like to put it, ecological. And when we're ecological, we are truly connected to the ecosystem. And that is the truth. We are just part of the ecosystem, which has always been an indigenous understanding,
Yes.
and never to put self first as such, the way we Americans do it, the way the West has been trained to think of self and other, but rather to be part of a larger holistic whole. And I very much appreciate your use of the word wholeness over and again in describing the type of depth that we can have when we touch upon the vertical and the way they intersect.
I say, long before there was ecological movement, there was ecological movement. And human history is a result of the ecological movement.
Yes.
And what you and I are working on is to initiate trans-ecological movement.
That's right.
And the ecological movement is part of it.
That's
because
right.
ecological consciousness is a consciousness of wholeness, and harmony and balance.
That's right.
With the rest of the universe and the rest of humanity and the rest of nature.
Exactly.
And different mode of consciousness is required for people to be ecological.
That's right.
And sometimes you can see ecological movement taking over ecological movement.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's done.
Yeah.
It's happened
Yeah,
already,
yeah,
actually.
yeah.
When
So-
any time something becomes institutionalized, it becomes ego-logical. And there's really seems like there's no way around it. It loses its organic connection and connectedness to the heart-mind.
Yeah. So it is so important for us to ongoingly develop what I call omnicentric field of consciousness.
Yes.
In which you are the center, I am the center, and everybody else is center and responsible. And when you have this omnicentric consciousness, the spontaneous order arises, which has its own design. And that is a new kind of society that will emerge once we begin to create a core of omnicentric consciousness.
Yes.
And in a sense that, what I'm trying to accomplish through my programs is to create an omnicentric consciousness in each person who partake in my program. So it is not just for spiritual enlightenment. Nobody has ever came up with something better than meditation for that purpose. All we can do with respect to enlightenment is to really, invent new technology for meditation, which I have done. But the other dimension is also need to be covered. So there is a pre-enlightenment development, the post-enlightenment development, and evolution. And we need to cover all of this. And that's why the old mode of spirituality has limitation. Once you get enlightened, so what? And nowadays, many people get enlightened, and then life, they have no more suffering, and life is basically fine. They don't need to, go to their psychologist anymore.
So they save money.
Save money and happy. But it is a form of contentment. And it has an element of self-deception involved.
And self-involvement. I would say.
Self-involvement, yes. Yeah. Indulgence, actually.
Yes.
And
I was being gentler.
yes. When we tune into our own spirit, our soul, our heart, there is this evolutionary thrust for optimization, more wholeness, more quality. And it is not ambition, it is not greed, none of those. There's a pure evolutionary thrust, which is the essence of life that permeates the universe. And children show that much better than we do. And one of the way that shows up is the curiosity.
Yeah.
Pure curiosity, wanting to know something. And by the time people become 7 years old, their curiosity is basically killed. Very few people somehow maintain it.
It depends on the context and the environment in which they're raised
Yes,
and educated.
exactly.
And I know that part of your idea about creating a more conscious, evolutionary minded and hearted world is one in which education in the family and in the school can more understand and appreciate that if we were to bloom like flowers do in the spring, that's truly our nature.
You know, in order to educate people, they need to
And
be,
to keep that going in life.
yes, they need to be educable. And educability usually get killed by the time they become 7, 12, so on and so
Exactly.
forth. And educability, the essence of educability is curiosity.
Hold on one second. We have to let everybody know that you are listening to Mitchell J. Rabin on A Better World on Progressive Radio Network, and we are speaking with the evolutionary leader teacher, Yasuhiko Genku Kimura, for the hour, and we're unpacking this notion of authentic thinking, and now we're going broader and deeper, if you can imagine that, at the same time. I would like to, Yasuhiko, bring this around to something that I began opening up, having to do with the fact that we really use 3 to 5% of our brain system and look at the world that we've got, a highly irrational, very inauthentic world.
How do you know it is 3 to 5%?
Well, I was about to comment on that, which is to say what we actually know about the nervous system.
Aha.
Are you reading my mind again?
No, no.
Okay. What we actually know about the nervous system is that all of the possible dendritic and neurological connections are infinite. So what we have is another example of dancing with the infinite. You've heard of Dancing with the Stars? This is another example of that.
We watched that program.
You do? Well, now you can bring another element to it. But it is, in fact, just our thinking, whatever it is, just our memory function, just our telepathic and intuitive functions, all of that is still occupying some small quantity of our entire neural functionality. That's the main point. And if all of the connectivity is considered to be infinite, then how do you take a measure of the infinite? You would actually know that better than I would. But let's just, relatively speaking, say that if we have 100% capacity ultimately, and we're using but a little bit of it, then we have a whole more distance to go. So if we were to employ the notions that you're putting on the table here, which are completely fascinating, I would like to hear what you would have to say of how we could go from where we are now into the creation of a world that could actually make use. And I know you're touching upon the whole idea of being educable. I'm reminded a lot in some of your speaking of my old teacher, Richard Bandler of neurolinguistic programming, who used to collapse time all the time, by the way, about saying that why should it take X amount of time, for instance, to heal a phobia, like years of psychotherapy on the couch or psychoanalysis, when if we can agree to shift the consciousness that brings about the phobia in about 40 seconds, you'll save yourselves a lot of time and trouble. So I know that there's an elasticity of time, and I know there's an elasticity of thought. And this gives us just intense possibility for shifting things quickly. But if we take a look at our bottom line now of where we are as an evolved humanity, and look at what the possibilities are, even a few that you've begun to suggest here, what is the road from where we are to that place? Please think, by the way, the body politic, the economy, think the real world, so we don't get lost in abstraction.
So we are going to solve that problem in the next 25 minutes.
No, 20.
Oh, 20 minutes?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. We have to really
1, 2, 3. But I wouldn't ask you to do anything that I don't think you're capable of.
Sometimes you overestimate me.
Am I expressing love or what?
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you. You know, I can approach this program, the issue.
Or just touch upon it.
Yes, from a little bit different perspective.
Okay.
When you come to my program, we talk about primacy of consciousness. And we ask our participants to take on that assumption that the consciousness is, and that is the fundamental existence, being, from which everything arises. Mm-hmm. That was the premise that we ask people to try on. And when you look at the issue that you just mentioned, including the brain, from the primacy of consciousness aspect, the substance of the universe is consciousness, and more precisely speaking, it is a complex of vibrations. Some people would call it thought. And brain and body is something like an operating system inside. And the 3% or 5% of the brain that we are using correspond to certain level of vibrations, thought vibrations that we are using. And the finer the vibration field in which our consciousness begin to function, the corresponding aspect of the brain will also appear to be activated. So the finer the thought and finer the language we use to express this thought or frame this thought, the finer will be the vibration that resonate with the brain that is not yet used today. So
you could almost call it the homeopathy of thinking.
Interesting. I like that. So from this perspective, two things, actually many things, but the two major things. One is we need to intentionally expose ourselves to a finer and finer form of thought, which will require deconstructing and reconstructing and recreating a finer form of language. And so the finer the language that you can create, which will host the thought, which is also finer, which reflect the finer vibrations, the part of the brain that is required to resonate with that thought will become activated. So that's a cultural aspect of it. And in our own...
So from that point of view, you could also say the invention of language, the original authentic use of language, mm-hmm. the creative use, mm-hmm. and one of our finer expressions in language, mm-hmm. of poetry, mm-hmm. becomes a way of refining thought. In other words, language is the food of thought.
Well, language is the growth of thought. And food for thought is other thought.
Which is constructed from language.
My thought is feeding your thought, and your thought is feeding my thought.
Yes.
So we are mutually feeding each other.
Exactly.
It's called feedback and feed forward.
That's right, exactly.
Communication.
But keep feeding.
And the language is the cloth, the frame. And finer thought requires a finer frame. And by creating a finer frame, also the thought that will be the content of that frame will become finer. So it goes together. Exactly. So I think it's poetry and philosophy and actually mathematics,
yes,
language.
Music.
Music.
That's okay.
Music. Those are the language,
right,
that host thought.
Yes.
And the more, the finer the frame, the thought will be finer. And that's one aspect. So, we can continue to work together in creating a new language, a finer language. The second aspect, from the spiritual perspective, most people's, you can say, people talk about 7 chakras. So let's just say 7. It's the 7 bodies: physical body, etheric body, astral body, mental body, and so on and so forth. Most people, most human beings have basically opened up to the mental body. Within this mental body also there's a microcosm of 7 bodies. And most human beings exist in the 4th micro body within the 4th macro body or mental body. And that corresponds to the 3 to 5% of brain that's being used.
Yes.
So we need to bring our center of consciousness, a chakric center of consciousness, higher and higher. And there are a number of meditation techniques that actually stimulate the evolution of chakric energy. And you're in my program, and you have one form of meditation, and as we develop into different advanced programs, I give people different form of meditations, which is designed to actually stimulate higher centers.
Yes.
And so Guruji talks about higher feeling center and higher thinking center.
Surely.
I do something similar in stimulating the higher chakric centers, which is connected to the centers that are beyond mental body. So that, and then when that happens, the part of the brain that is capable of resonating with that the vibrations will begin to vibrate. So in this way, and since it is infinity, it will take eternal time to activate all of it.
Yes.
But
we've got the time.
We can move on and move on. And therefore, for children, it is important for us to expose them to a high culture and higher form of language.
Sure.
From the very beginning.
From early on.
And there are a number of brilliant thinkers who actually invented a new language. They appear to be like English. For example, if their base is English, Buckminster Fuller, Herbert Gunther. When you read their books, although they use English, how they use English is different.
But there are also many poets, even
including lots of
E.
poets.
Cummings as one example, going back many years.
Yeah.
But Gurdjieff also did it using Latin and Greek etymological roots of English and of the Romance languages.
Yes.
In his Beelzebub's Tales to his grandson, very much reinvents a language.
Yes.
And but I also wanted to circle back around to something.
And you and I also are engaged in that work
practice
of reinventing or inventing a new language. And many great spiritual teachers have done the same.
Yeah.
Although I haven't read Rumi in original language, it seems that he invented a new language.
Yes.
Dogen, who was the contemporary of Rumi, his writing is different from anybody else.
Is that so?
He invented Dogenese, which is not Japanese or Chinese.
Is that
he
true?
used the Japanese and Chinese to the maximum effect, but it is his unique style.
Would you say the same thing? Because you translated Lao Tzu from Chinese into...
Lao Tzu's writing is not that original.
Not that different?
Yeah.
Okay. But the ideas were...
His job was to simply state it. Dogen was actually up to something more, which is to actually reinvent a language which is more consonant and concordant with this non-dual consciousness that he was trying to convey.
In language.
Yes.
Interesting. And is that where we get the koan?
Koan is precedes Dogen. And Dogen was not too much into koan in using koan in teaching students, although he collected the 300 koans, in the form of book.
I would say this as I'm listening here, Yasuhiko, that I think that the use of not only Jewish, but any number of kinds of humor is also a road, a path to understanding contradiction in language, hypocrisy in action and attitude, and helps us circle around from a point of tension and conflict to resolution, which can help us move along an evolutionary path, funny as it may sound, to greater awareness and consciousness.
Yes, in the beginning of our...
Does that make sense to you?
Yes. And in the beginning of our,
humor as a spiritual path.
Yes, and I want to talk about this. In the beginning of our conversation, you mentioned rationality. Today, rationality has kind of a negative connotation to many people, but to me, it is very, very, very positive.
Oh, me too.
And
yeah.
People confuse rationality with logicality. You meet a lot of logical people who are totally irrational.
Right.
And rationality requires
way deeper
the sense of wholeness.
Oh, yeah.
You see, rational means rational. In order to see the ratio, you have to have the whole picture.
That's right.
You need to have a wholeness in your mind to be able to see the ratio of things.
It's proportion.
Proportions, exactly. Harmonics. Therefore, rational mind is a mind that is attuned to wholeness. And logical mind, logical is a part
it's
of
a subset.
A subset.
Yeah.
And when people are focusing the subset only, they become irrational.
That's right.
You look, there are a lot of the terrorists was very logical people. In order to coordinate, suppose that I'm not going into conspiracy theory at the moment. Just accept the official story that it was the terrorist who destroyed the World Trade Center.
Yes.
Imagine the amazing logic behind coordinating all of this. It took years and years.
Sure.
That's logical. But what they have done is completely irrational. And sanity requires rationality. So there are a lot of brilliant logical people who are irrational and insane.
It runs the same parallel as the attitude toward the anti-intellectual and anti-thought notion that you will find in spirituality in the New Age.
Exactly.
It really runs parallel.
And
But I want to circle around to something else and
Yes.
hear what you have to say. And we are beginning to, even though it's eternal, and I appreciate it, and I agree with it, out of time. Linear time only. So we'll go into great depth in our remaining minutes. As you were speaking, Yasuhiko, I was thinking about two things coming back to Tibetan Buddhism. One is that one of the definitions of meditation is concentration. It's not anywhere said that one should be sitting in a cave or a monastery for that matter, in a full lotus and staring at the wall, for one, or even at one's belly button for that matter, although both have their value. So that's just one thing. Concentration is something that we're doing in everyday life all the time. And from, the ancient Tibetan point of view, we are actually meditating when we're clear of purpose and focus. And number two, in both the Tibetan Buddhist psychology, which I really like to call it, and in the Vedic counterpart of the Abhidharma, we find an intense understanding of the nature of perception. And I just want to bring that to bear in this conversation because it seems like it has a large role to play in the further refinement of our ability to enjoy and create language and to move our consciousness to another level playing field. Could you comment on that? Because if you say that they have not evolved, you could almost also say that science is just catching up with them.
In that sense, yes. But meditation, the original term for meditation in Sanskrit, dhyan, means to stabilize. And it actually has the yin and yang aspect. That in Chinese, yin is a movement of radiation. When you radiate, the vacuum is created, and therefore there's a sucking back.
It's the yin and yang.
And yang is actually a generative movement. You concentrate, and then when you concentrate, there will be vacuum outside, and then again goes back. So yin and yang are movement. So concentration without decentration is imbalanced. So meditation is actually both the rhythmic balanced interchange, as Walter Russell said, is a concentration, decentration. When there's you breathe in, you cannot be just breathing out and out and out. You need to breathe in the same way.
Right.
There's a breathing in and breathing out.
Inhale and exhale.
In terms of movement of consciousness. So stabilization, meditation is this rhythm of concentration, decentration, concentration, decentration. When this rhythm is taking place, there's a harmony to your consciousness, and it begins to turn into the silent background upon which the waves of thought comes into being. So now you become holistically aware of the background and the foreground. And foreground is going in concentration, decentration, concentration, decentration. And there's space that actually hold both movements.
Yes.
And you become aware of all those three. And when that happens, you are in meditation. So Tibetans and many people focus on concentration, but actually that is one side of the story. When this happens, then your perception becomes supra-perception, your conception becomes supra-conception, and your rational mind is moving toward trans-rational mind. And that is the wholeness that is available for us today. It has always been available, but now we can actually go beyond that which people before us have achieved.
You know what? What we're going to do is next time we'll take on another task when we have you on again of unpacking enlightenment.
I think we need to have infinite time to talk about this subject together.
I agree.
You see, so you need to have a perpetual radio program. And then you and I talk, and the people can join us also.
Exactly. Listen and back and forth,
yes.
Yin and yang.
Yin and yang, yes. Feed in and feed back and feed forward.
Exactly.
Yes.
Remember to feed forward.
Yes. It's
and
very
we will
important.
go beyond 24/7.
Yes.
What a finite world.
Exactly.
Yasuhiko, what a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Really brilliant thinking and inspired yet again.
Thank you.
Tell us your website so people can go and get more information.
www.visioninAction.org.
Excellent. One more time.
www.visioninAction.org.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you so much
Thank you so much,
your
Michel.
contribution. Arigatou gozaimasu.
どういたしまして。
Well, I hope you enjoyed that and got inspired by that as much as I did. You can listen to that over and over again and get the true nourishment of this intellectual conversation and dialogue. This is Mitchell J. Rabin for A Better World. Please join us at our website at www.abetterworld.tv, abetterworld.tv, and get on our mailing list, our newsletter that comes out. And remember that we have another radio show every Wednesday at 6 p.m. and a TV show every Tuesday night at 10:30 on Manhattan Neighborhood Network here in New York City. Thanks again for joining us, and I look forward to seeing you all next week.